Good afternoon from Washington, D.C., where it's sunny and a nice, cool fall day. I don't know what it's like out there in California, Sandor. You can tell us that later. My name is Jennifer Turner. I direct the China Environment Forum at the Woodrow Wilson Center. I've been here for 21 years, done a lot on climate, biodiversity, water management. And the last few years, as many of you know, I've been kind of dumpster diving, doing a lot on sludge, food waste, and most recently, with support from Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership, we have a project called Turning the Tide on Plastic Waste in Asia. And in that project, we're doing meetings, publications, and policy briefs, and doing a lot of comparison also with the United States, which is what the meeting today. We have a lot of conversation that's going to go on today about plastic waste challenges and solutions in the US. In fact, the meeting is called Partnerships and Business Innovation to Rein in Plastic Waste in the US and China. We're going to lean a little bit heavier on the US. My China speaker had to step out last minute, but I will be filling in with giving some good information on some of the policy and problem trends in China that and how that's been catalyzing some of the kind of partnerships that we're seeing in the US. So here we go. We know that the US and China are major contributors to global plastic production, consumption, and pollution. And there's this recognition that to solve it, we're going to need a lot of partnerships. And today I have a cool panel, a trio of speakers who are going to talk about how they've been building partnerships to reduce plastic waste and create a circular economy for plastic waste. We're going to start off with Tiana Lightfoot-Svendsen, who is the communication and project manager for the US Plastics Pact. She's going to kick off our discussion by introducing what is a US Plastics Pact. And also, I even forgot to ask, is it your first birthday yet, Tiana, for the Plastic Pact?
We just turned one.
You just turned one. That's an exciting day today. So happy birthday, the US Plastics Pact. She's going to talk about how it's been playing a big role in bringing together US plastic manufacturers, retailers, NGOs, regulators to try to eliminate some of the most problematic plastics, finding ways to ensure that we recycle them and that they don't leak into the ocean. And she'll tell you more. Next, we've got Anthony Tusino, who's a senior associate for policy and government affairs at WWF. He's a specialist in recycling. He's going to talk about WWF's work to encourage US waste management systems to reform and to incentivize the recycling. Should note, and I'm sure Anthony may say a bit too, that WWF, global organization, we had your Malaysian colleague here. We're going to get some of your China colleagues to also talk about their plastic work, but welcome to you too. And last but not least, we have Sandor Nagy, who is the Group VP of Supply Chain at Driscoll's. And he's going to talk about the steps that Driscoll's, which is the world's largest berry seller, could be in your fridge right now, everyone. He's going to talk about the steps that they're taking to reduce plastic waste in their distribution line. And I already mentioned that I'm going to talk a little bit about China to help catalyze some good questions for the US because it's a global problem. And what the US and China do on this, including, and also Europe, don't want to neglect our European friends, are really going to determine the standards moving forward. So I'm going to also note, surprise for the audience, that the China Environment Forum has been picked to debut the Wilson Center's new live Q&A tool. So if you look at your screen, that beneath it, there's this little, it's a little panel widget where you can submit your question and I can see it and I'll be able to ask the speakers. If for some reason that doesn't work for you, you can also tweet us or email us. That information is down below too. But enough stalling. It's time for Tiana to share her screen and let's get this show on the road.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you to the Wilson Center and Tracy and the team for allowing us the space to talk about this critical issue. The US Plastics Pact, as we just mentioned, is a little over a year old. We were established in August of 2020, and we're led by the Recycling Partnership and the World Wildlife Fund, and we operate under the framework of Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Global Plastics Pact network. We all know that this crisis is too big and too important to tackle alone, which is why the US Plastics Pact formed to serve as a consortium with voices all across the plastics value chain. We have representation from local governments, not-for-profit organizations, businesses, brands, and retailers to set a national strategy to realize a circular economy through our 4 targets and measure progress and report out. And we really want to empower businesses, governments, and anyone involved with plastics to work effectively and to accelerate progress so that we keep plastics in the economy and out of the environment. This is a map showing Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Plastics Pact members. We work with our partners all over the globe, especially Canada, since a lot of the market is shared there. India recently formed a Plastics Pact, and we would love to have China added to this map. Here is a logo lockup of many of our members. We have over 100 activators, and we call them activators because we want them to be active. So those are the members that are working together to create a circular economy for plastic packaging. And you'll see a lot of big names that you recognize like Target and Walmart and Coca-Cola. But we also have groups like Precious Plastic Sensi, which is a startup. And whether you are a small business that only has 2 employees or a huge corporation, you have the same voice and same seat at the table with the US Plastics Pact. Our 4 targets are what our group is focused on to help realize a circular economy and set that strategy. And target number 1 is to create a list of packaging that is problematic or unnecessary. And we are working on that right now, and we'll have that list ready by the end of the year. And then as a collective, we'll take measures to eliminate those items that we have deemed problematic or unnecessary by 2025. Our second target is for 100% of plastic packaging produced by our activators to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. Target 3 is our moonshot goal. And that is because there are so many external factors at play to helping ensure that recycling or composting of 50% of plastic packaging is possible by 2025. There's infrastructure and changes in collection and all sorts of things that need to be underway for us to realize this ambitious goal. And then target 4 is a little bit different. So if you look at the other pacts in Ellen MacArthur Foundation's network, the goals are very similar, but they're tailored to each country or region. And target 4 stands out because we are the only pact currently in the world to include bio-based content. So we want an average of 30% recycled content, which is responsibly sourced or bio-based content by 2025. And so through these 4 targets, that is how, as a group, we are going to reduce the use of non-renewable virgin plastic and minimize negative impacts on the environment and human health. Even though we're only a year old, we've accomplished quite a lot. We started out with 62 activators, and now we have over 100 members. We've honed in on our scope and what we want to accomplish through the publication of our roadmap. We formed relationships with pacts all over the world, created work streams, which are working groups to help us actualize items in our roadmap. And we've defined the criteria that we're going to use to form the problematic and unnecessary materials list. Each of our activators has an important role to play in the pact, and responsibilities are broken down by what sector that they represent and what seat they have at the table. So whether they're providing counsel or legal expertise or examples or insight on consumer behavior. So for our local governments, it's really important to understand where residents are getting confused, because you can have the most phenomenally designed product in a wonderful recycling system, but if that resident doesn't know where to put that material, it's all for naught. So it's really important to include local governments. All of our activators are expected to help engage and promote the work and use our 4 targets as a basis for goals within their own organizations. And so those are some really important things that we ask them to consider, as well as contributing their knowledge and insights into the work of the pact. Anthony may touch on this a bit in his presentation, but the US Plastics Pact utilizes World Wildlife Fund's Resource Plastic Footprint Tracker, and every single one of our activators is expected to report data. And so for not-for-profit organizations who are not producing resin, they would provide more qualitative examples of how they're helping the group reach the 4 targets. But every single member is showing what they are doing to help propel the circular economy. That data is then aggregated and will be released in a baseline report that we will share likely in March of next year. Our work streams are the small groups where we are making sure that we're meeting our roadmap deliverables. Anthony will talk more about the work with the policy team. We also have a group that's focused on reuse pilots. And I mentioned our problematic and unnecessary materials team, and the unpack labeling group just started. So we break it down into small groups, and each of these small groups has representation throughout the value chain. So we don't have one group that's only brands or one group that's only nonprofit organizations. We make sure that the whole value chain is informing this process and doing the important tasks necessary. This is a really important example of a work product from our problematic and necessary materials group. And so looking at a piece of plastic packaging and trying to figure out, is it problematic? Will we be able to recycle it now or in the next few years? And taking a material through that decision-making criteria to make it fair and transparent and as easily digestible as possible. Our nonprofit activators do not pay anything to participate in the pact, and that is because we want to make sure that membership is accessible and everyone has a seat at a table. And then our for-profit activators pay a fee to participate each year based on their annual US sales revenue. We have a program for BiPAC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color led or owned small businesses, to make sure that they are able to join the pact. If they have less than $1 million in revenue, their activator fees for the year are completely waived. And then between 1 million and 50 million, it's cut in half. So since the launch of our roadmap, we've been working with our work streams to make sure the deliverables are met, especially target 3, that moonshot goal. And then the baseline report will be released in early 2020. This is such an important time. Of course, China's national sword sparked a lot of action in the US and questions about how we move forward. And then COVID and turmoil in the market. And so it's like we're standing there and the sweater has become unraveled and we're holding just a pile of yarn in our hands. And so we're getting to knit it back together, and we want to make it even better than it was before. And so we're delighted to work with all of our members to make sure that we actualize a circular economy and close the loop on plastics. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We would love to stay connected with you and answer any questions you have about the pact, but now I'm going to turn it over to Anthony.
Thank you so much. And we'll make sure that on the website that after the meeting that we will put some information online about how to get your information to Tiana. Anthony, you want to share your screen?
Great, thank you so much. I sure will, if I can remember how after doing this for so long.
I know.
Great, thank you so much, Tiana and Jennifer, for hosting us today. It's been amazing to see the US Plastics Pact grow to include more than 100 organizations and turn a year old. Really exciting to see all of these groups come together, from small nonprofits to large nonprofits like WWF, and some of the biggest and smallest businesses that have a lot to contribute to our approach to ending plastic waste. So I'll talk today a bit about how policy can help us approach the plastic waste issue and create a lot of those connections between businesses and between governments, and especially between businesses and governments and citizens, to make the change that we want to see in the world. I'll start by talking about World Wildlife Fund vision and the way that we approach the plastic waste crisis. We call it No Plastic in Nature by 2030. The idea that by 2030, plastic will no longer enter our landscapes, our nature, our ecosystems, or our local environments, recognizing that not only does plastic waste pose a significant threat to our natural world, but also to our local communities. And that starts by evaluating and eliminating unnecessary plastic. Consumers are overwhelmed and overloaded with so much plastic of so many different types and don't know how plastic waste incorporates into our existing waste management systems or our future waste management systems. So it's important to understand that balance, but also ensuring that we're shifting toward sustainable sources. One of the key targets of the US Plastics Pact goals that Tiana mentioned was the inclusion for bio-based plastic, that if we're going to source plastic from bio feedstocks rather than petroleum or gas feedstocks, that it's sustainable, that we're not converting huge amounts of lands to fuel our need for plastic and use its very valuable properties without creating an undue impact on our planet. And of course, building the system for circularity to become the standard bearer of our economy to implement, reuse, recycle, and compost all plastic that we use, so we ensure that we're getting the most value out of all of our materials. And so we work toward our vision of no plastic in nature by working in 4 key areas. First is with cities. This is our on-the-ground implementation work with a lot of cities in Southeast Asia to help them understand their waste streams and what interventions on the ground, whether that be infrastructure or education or consumer and corporate interventions, can help us manage our waste streams. We work with some of the world's largest companies through our resource plastic footprint tracker and through the US Plastics Pact to understand what the landscape of plastic is in the United States, what's being created, how it's being used, how it's being managed or mismanaged or incinerated or landfilled. And we can't build interventions unless we have that landscape of what's going on. So it's great to see the resource plastic footprint tracker in its own right and through the US Plastics Pact really building that knowledge and that data that we can all work to create and implement the interventions that we believe can make a circular economy. I focus specifically on policy in the way that government interventions, specifically here in the United States at the federal level, can help consumers and businesses and local governments all achieve their goals to reduce plastic waste, to increase recycling, and reduce our reliance on unnecessary materials. And then, of course, as a large conservation organization with a large amount of supporters, we really look to the public to advance our agenda, to keep it at the top of mind of our policymakers and of those that we do business with, and ensuring that this gets the attention that it deserves. I always like to talk about some public opinion polling just to set the ground level assessment of why are we here? Why is this an important issue? And at the end of the day, it's important because it's important to the public. 86% of the public believes that we must reduce our waste and transition to circularity, while 81% of the public wants to increase recycling, which is really key here. And 77% of the public agrees that too many products are made of plastic, that when a consumer goes to their blue bin and they have a piece of plastic, they hope that it's recyclable, they think that it's recyclable, but sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it's confusing, and the system that we're using at the moment isn't quite working. A lot of our recycling and waste management policy was created before we had so much plastic and single-use items in our homes. And we haven't updated or revised those guidelines or policies to reflect that consumers have a large responsibility in the waste management system and not necessarily the right tools to meet that responsibility. So what can policy do to help address some of these concerns? I think the main point here, I call it corporate and government accountability, but it is about corporate and government partnerships, both recognizing that traditionally governments are in charge of local waste management systems, and our corporate partners are the ones who give us those things and put them in our home, and we extract value from them, but we need to close that loop so that when we create or receive a piece of packaging, it's actually fitting into the waste management system that we have in our own homes or in our own communities. That starts with extended producer responsibility, which has the ability to streamline the way that packaging is produced and ensure that the right market signals are there to incentivize the use of recycled content rather than virgin content. Deposit return systems, also sometimes called bottle bills, which can be an important way to extract value from our waste stream, and post-consumer recycled content mandates, ensuring that we're actually using the recycled content that we're creating for new packaging, not actually just downcycling a lot of the valuable materials that we have. And all 3 of those points are echoed in the US Plastics Pact roadmap, which is a really incredible milestone to see that we all recognize that these are important and productive systems. Some of those details certainly aren't worked out yet, but it is where the national conversation is moving. And as I've talked about before, looking at what materials we create and ensuring that they're sustainable, reusable, and recyclable is absolutely important. Addressing the financial incentives. Currently, it costs way less for local governments to landfill products rather than recycle them or bring them to a recycling facility. And lots of communities don't even have access to a recycling facility. So ensuring that there's the appropriate investments into these waste streams, also including principles of environmental justice when we create or site plastic production or landfilling plants to make sure that we're not creating undue burdens on our local communities. And finally, really understanding that the United States is one player in this global problem. China is also a major player in this global problem. We need a global treaty to address the global problem. I like to think of it as a Paris Agreement for plastics, where every nation sets a target for waste reduction and waste management and implements it to their own abilities to make sure that we're being responsible with the waste that we create, maximizing our ability to recycle and ensuring that consumers are playing into an equitable system. Finally, just one piece about how coalitions and partnerships are so important to the work that we're doing. Tiana spoke at great detail about the US Plastics Pact. It's amazing when businesses and NGOs and experts and state and local governments all come together and think about and solve the same issues. And we've done that also in WWF with our One Source Coalition, which is a really policy-focused group focusing on an extended producer responsibility, environmental justice, and the global treaty. And that includes some of the biggest names like Coke and Pepsi and Danone, Nestle, and some of our expert and NGO partners as well. So there's a lot of partnerships and creative thinking, and it's amazing to see NGOs and businesses come together when usually they don't. It's great when they do, and it's a lot of progress all in one space, addressing the same sets of problems that we're seeing, coming up with a lot of these new and innovative solutions. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Yeah, well, I should say that now, Tiana and Anthony, you have galvanized. I got my first question. I'm not going to ask you to right now, but I want to remind the audience that if you see, I know you're mesmerized by the presentations and the PowerPoints, but look below that stream and you'll see there's a Q&A box and it's working. There was a question that came in about getting international cooperation. So hang on for that one, Anthony. So again, ask questions online. It's exciting. I love when Wilson Center moves. We're moving to the modern age. It's awesome. Sandor, could you share your screen if you have a PowerPoint, and we will be ready to hear your story about what Driscoll's is doing.
Yes. Hi, Jennifer. I don't have a PowerPoint.
That's okay.
I'm going to speak and share a couple of thoughts from our vantage point. Can you hear me okay, Jennifer?
I can hear you beautifully and see those berry pictures behind you in full color.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be part of this panel and to share our story and what we're doing and the challenge ahead of us and how we're thinking about it. We operate in a world of constrained resources, and which is sounds sort of obvious. However, when you're running a large business, you really have to think about what to do about those constraints and how we can be here, not just for the next year, next 5 years, but we're thinking in generational terms, how the business can be sustained and how we can live in a sustainable way in the communities and the environments where we operate. And we think of resources along a couple of different dimensions: labor, water, energy, and raw materials, to name four. There are others, and I would offer up those four as areas that are very core to our business. In the area of labor, we are partnered with Fair Trade and working actively with Fair Trade. In water, we've actually adopted and Anthony's probably aware of this, we've adopted the WWF framework and signed up for the WWF, what's called the Ag Water Challenge, and we're part of that whole effort. In the area of energy, we are making investments, significant investments in solar energy, renewable energy, clean energy, and battery technology to power our various operations. And then finally, bringing us to the topic today, raw materials. Two key raw materials in the delivery of our product are plastics and paper. And while we're not going to talk about paper today, we also have significant efforts underway to be more efficient and more sustainable in the area of paper. In the area of plastics, Driscoll's is the first U.S. produce company to sign on to the Ellen MacArthur New Plastics Economy Global Commitment, which unites over 500 like-minded organizations from around the world to build a common vision for a circular economy and a circular economy around plastics. Our approach is very similar to what Tiana laid out, and it scaffolds off of what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and its members are doing. We have a four-pronged approach around plastics. The first is to take action to eliminate problematic or unnecessary packaging. What does that mean in real terms? Well, to put it into perspective, we will ship almost 2 billion clamshells of berries next year, and each of those packages of berries provides an opportunity for us to eliminate or reduce unnecessary packaging, and we do that through a process called value engineering. So we have teams that work with our partners and suppliers to look for ways to eliminate excess packaging through things like thinner sidewalls of packaging, less flange material, and plastic, despite all of the negative focus around plastic, it is actually a highly efficient transport mechanism for a perishable, fragile product. And so what we want to be careful of is that we don't make changes that end up causing harm in other ways, such as increasing the cost of transportation, or increasing fuel burn, or increasing food waste and spoilage. And so we're really looking at this in a multidimensional way, with a focus to eliminate and reduce problematic and unnecessary packaging. And we are actively working on a transition to paper or fiberboard packaging, which I'll come back to in a second. The second area of focus for us is taking action to move towards reuse models where possible. And a good example of that is the packaging that's used to ship the packaging material. Again, I'll repeat that because the packaging in which our packaging material comes has historically been discarded, and we've gone to a reuse model where we can increase the reuse of the packaging that's used to ship our packaging by 100x. In other words, we're able to use containers 100 times where previously they were discarded after one use. And that's an example of thinking outside the box to find ways to move away from a single use to a reuse model. The third area, Jennifer, is to take action to achieve 100% of our plastic packaging to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And there's too many things to list here that we are doing, and I don't want to take up all the time. I'll highlight a couple of things that we're doing that are visible and we've been very public about. In fact, we rallied the berry industry towards a solution to create a washable label on our plastic clamshell. And that's what's called a biaxially oriented polypropylene, or BOPP label. And why is that good? That's good because currently the top label on your Driscoll's clamshell of berries, or any clamshell of berries for that matter, does not separate off in the recycling process. And so what ends up happening is it pollutes the recycling process and renders the recycled flake unusable for most applications associated with food. And so this transition to the so-called BOPP label enables the clamshell to be fully recyclable. In addition to that, we're moving to recycled absorption pads that go inside some of our berries, like raspberries and blackberries. I'll also mention that we've adopted, along with top retailers around the globe, the so-called how to recycle monogram and information. And so if you look at various consumer products today and you flip them over, more and more you will see a how to recycle message to the consumer of how to recycle that particular package and the various material that comes with the product. And so we're very excited to embrace this new standard, and that'll be rolling out on our packaging. And then finally, the fourth area of focus for us is to set ambitious recycled content targets for our plastic packaging. Today, 50% of the plastic that is used to make our packages is non-virgin. So it's coming from post-consumer content. So we're already at a relatively high percent, but we're not stopping there. We want to continue to push that to 60, 70, 80% and close that loop. And that's where it really does require a very broad set of stakeholders to partner together to reclaim plastic thermoforms. And so we are driving our suppliers and material recovery facilities and the industry to capture more and more of the used clamshells, or what we call in the trade plastic thermoforms, back into the recycling stream. Plastic bottles already have a very high rate of recycling, and most of those go back to the people who fill the bottles with a beverage. And we're leaning in and driving the closed loop on plastic thermoforms. So I'll stop there. I've kind of thrown out a lot of things. Those are some of the areas where we are focused.
That's great. I think I don't want to mess you guys up, but I've been getting a bunch of questions. I think I want to toss out a couple of questions and then I'll talk about China. Is that okay? Everyone good with that? And also reminding people, thank you for the 3 people who've submitted right now. Underneath the video, there's a little box to submit your question. But one question that it starts with Tiana. Wow, they're just popping in here like crazy now. So Deb Kopsnick from Johns Hopkins University, she said, and then I have one specifically for you, Sandor, in a second. The targets listed by Tiana are exciting and ambitious. Does the US currently have sufficient recycling capability, or will some kind of action be needed to develop this capacity, maybe government subsidies to increase the economic viability of the recycling industry? Which is, and then to add on to that is, because you just said at the end of your talk, Sandor, that you want to make your plastic thermal forms, I just call them clamshells, more, get more of them recycled. And so I think it's great because you have this innovation, and I'm guessing Tiana and Anthony have questions too, of other companies that they're getting ready, they want to standardize their plastics, make them more recyclable. But Tiana, can we do it?
It's going to take a lot of work. It's definitely possible. We shouldn't just give up because it's hard. Quite the opposite. It should drive us to act in big ways and post haste. And so to the questionnaires point, though, we definitely need investment in infrastructure and MRF upgrades to capture more plastic and more types of material. We have a nationwide shortage of drivers. So the people that are actually collecting the material and driving the trucks, we need more folks to do the actual hard work of picking up the material. And same at MRFs, materials recovery facilities, not enough folks working there and sorting the material and baling it. And so certainly the needs are huge. And so with the pact and with Target 3 in particular, we have a team that's focused on creating a model. So different scenarios of what that looks like. And it will have to change over time, and it should change over time, but just taking every factor into consideration. And I would recommend, for those of you who haven't seen it, the work the Recycling Partnership is doing in this space to highlight the need and the cost associated with making sure materials are recycled.
Anthony, I assume you want to jump in on that question.
Sure. I mean, Tiana, that's an excellent answer. The Recycling Partnership's recent report, I think it came out about a month ago, really dives into what the needed infrastructure improvements are across the United States. I think it's been a real big notice of not only the conservation community, but also the corporate community, that the goals that we're all setting, whether it's in the Plastics Pact or on our own, are very ambitious. And we need a lot of that collective action to drive not only new infrastructure, but also that parity between it's really cheap to use virgin materials and it's very expensive or comparatively expensive to use recycled content. So even when businesses want to use recycled content, not only are they competing with each other for a very rare commodity, but even those economic decisions don't always make sense. So that's where a lot of things like extended producer responsibility comes in, or reevaluating the way that we assess landfilling charges. It's a really big challenge, but I think Tiana's absolutely right. It's not something that we can shy away from.
I'm going to ask you to follow up and give me, say a little bit more about what you mean by EPR, because right now we don't have a national, first of all, you're going to tell everyone what EPR is. We know it's being discussed and debated up on the Hill, and the state of Maine has an EPR law. California wants one. So what the heck is EPR, Anthony? And how would it help this recycling question you're saying?
We can do the elevator pitch. Extended producer responsibility is essentially the idea that businesses who produce plastic packaging and printed paper pay a fee to be collected and invested by a third party into investment for recycling infrastructure, recycling access, and that fee paid by our corporate partners is both used for the intended purposes for advancing recycling, but also it uses a term that we call eco-modulation, where those who create packages that are hard to recycle pay a higher fee, and those that are easier to recycle or use recycled content or are reusable pay a lower fee. So it really creates the incentive for corporate partners to make new packaging, to innovate their existing packaging, but also provides much needed funding into recycling infrastructure and collection. There's been notably a bill that passed in Maine that implements EPR in Maine. A couple of other states have taken up consideration, like Maryland and New York and California all have their own ideas. WWF is supportive of a national extended producer responsibility model to ensure that everyone, regardless of where you live, plays into a productive recycling system. So it's really encouraging to see these conversations happening here in the United States. We've seen models for success in Germany and elsewhere, and in the EU, they have their own programs, but it's exciting to see it happening here at home.
And maybe just real quickly, for last one for this round, and then I'll toss out some China stuff and we'll go back to chatting. Sandor, just in talking about, I mean, it sounds like some of the actions that Driscoll's is taking, it's almost like you're creating your own enhanced producer responsibility system by, I mean, you're self-motivated because you see, because you see the market for it. What was it? Wanted to ask you about your thoughts about, because you're in California where I think EPR is being discussed. I was curious what you think about how maybe the EPR can help you in your efforts. And then there's a question in from Venkatarama Sharma, a scientist at the National Center for Coastal Research in India, has asked, have industries like Driscoll's shared their developed strategies for circular reusable plastics, stepping up to 80%, getting away from non-virgin plastics, with other industry associations so that they are, so they can get more companies on board? So I guess he's asking that, he or she's asking the question about, are you creating your own little partnership network to follow your standards?
So two questions. Let me take them both. Regarding EPR, we're actively following that, and you're absolutely right. That EPR has much more traction in Europe, and we have a large European business. I didn't talk about it. Our European business is actively moving to fiberboard, paperboard type of packaging for fresh berries that has a different EPR profile. Just because it's paper doesn't mean it doesn't have EPR. Paper has EPR as well. It's just different. So we're absolutely actively following that. And you're right. We're really guided by what our consumers are telling us and what we think is the right thing to do so that our business is around 10, 50, 100 years from now. And that is what guides us. And our consumers are vocal and tell us that this matters to them, and the sustainability efforts and how we approach packaging matters to them. So we're doing our best to try to listen to the consumers that eat our berries. And then to the question coming out of India, it was a fairly broad question. The partnerships, we're absolutely partnering with a variety of technology companies, big and small. For example, we're working with a company on a new marking symbology that would think of it as sort of an invisible symbology that would go on the clamshell that would enable material recycling facilities to efficiently and reliably separate out the plastic thermoforms. If you've ever been to a material recycling facility, and I encourage everyone to go to one, they are really interesting and you'll learn a lot. You can see the challenges of separating everything that comes in through the garbage stream. And so we're working with a variety of companies, technology companies, incubators, to innovate new technologies to enhance the sorting. And that is a big piece of the equation.
That's great. So I have to say, as I'm putting up my slides, I should note that, Sandor, that when I was a couple of months ago, I actually went to my grocery store and I saw one of these cardboard containers with your Driscoll strawberries, and I grabbed it and I was so excited, and I was going to contact your company. And then it kind of ends up I was organizing this meeting. I said, so I wanted to say, wow, it's exciting, and I'm hoping I can see that more. We could go into that more in a second, but all right. So I'm going to talk just briefly, giving you just talk a little bit of the China context, because obviously you guys are focused on the US, the pact is global, but Driscoll's, you're global as well. And what happens in China, it's not like Las Vegas. What happens there doesn't stay there, right? So China's been working hard to kind of scale the plastic packaging mountain, and has already been noted, and most people listening should know about China's green sword policy that stopped importing plastic recyclables. And that happened in great part because, let's see, let me get my, sorry, there we go. It happened in great part because what's happening in Chinese grocery stores is the same as in ours. There's a lot of plastics around everything. I mean, my favorite is the pears, the styrofoam pear sleeves, that, and all of this is just, contributing to the mountains of their waste. I mean, they had been struggling for years, and they hadn't really been doing a lot of policies on plastic waste. And so around 2016, 2017, that's when they started kind of formulating the idea that they needed to start focusing on the internal waste management challenges. And besides, there's the grocery stores, but also single-use plastics. One of the biggest growth industries is, of course, the food delivery. I mean, Meituan, that's the largest food delivery app in China. They deliver 100 million plastic food containers every day, and that's enough to carpet 300 soccer stadiums. And I'm sure the WWF and US Plastic Pact, you have similar kind of social math, we like to call it, how to think about the actual scale of how big things are in terms of the waste. I want to note that in China, that in actually as early as 2017, the NGO Green Volunteer League Chongqing filed a public interest lawsuit against Meituan and Ele.me and Baidu, other food delivery companies, saying that they needed to do something to stop, because they were just generating a lot of excess garbage, particularly with the plastic utensils. And so it didn't go all the way to court, but all three agreed that they were going to change their apps. And so it's kind of an example that Sandor, you just mentioned, companies responding to, this is in case an NGO, but consumers were also getting frustrated with all the plastics they were getting delivered to them. But what's neat is that just in the last year or so, that Meituan, which is actually China's largest e-commerce platform. They don't just do food delivery. They have this Qingshan plan, the Green Mountain plan, that they want to establish they're establishing plastic food container recycling systems in 20 provinces. And they're really trying to become a leader in providing other e-commerce and food delivery companies kind of systems to how they could recycle their kind of repetitive, non-recyclable or repetitive use packaging. And so this is just one example where there's actually a company that they're having problems with dealing with their own plastic, but now they're creating a platform and creating a new business model so that they can, they can help China find solutions. And it's in great part because companies are seeing the writing on the wall with policies and what's happening in the country. The landfills are overflowing. Most are at capacity. And incineration has had to be expanded. The 13th and 14th five-year plans have both put forward that they want China to be incinerating 50% of all their municipal solid waste and 60% in Eastern China. And something that may be a lot of confusing to a lot of people who think that, well, China closed their door to our recycling. How can they be having recycling hunger? The problem is that their system completely changed. Just like Tiana mentioned at the beginning, the brakes were hit that we were no longer shipping our plastics to China. And so like the US, they've had to try to create the regulations and the systems necessary to create a more close the loop on plastics. And so in 2017, the war on pollution in China opened up to waste. Before it had first been air pollution, water pollution, and now it's waste. And the first sign that we saw was that 46 cities were mandated to create sorting and collection pilots. So this is like the plastic first mile problem. How do we actually get the waste to sort it? And many of you must have seen in the news that Shanghai, I think, is the system that may be considered the winner. It's very draconian, aggressive sorting, trying to use sometimes high tech and low tech together. You have old people standing outside making sure that they're the monitors and make sure you throw it in the right bins. Facial recognition technology. The public wasn't that happy with it, but this kind of model, that this requirement of making the public sort is it's happening right now in China, because again, they need to get it sorted so they can actually feed it into the recycling system. To help encourage that, we saw in 2020 the solid waste law amendments. So again, there's the sorting mandates, there are more fines, and you're starting to see, and in that law and in other guidelines, they're talking more about enhanced producer responsibility. I see it as more like the shot over the bow, because they're not quite ready yet, I think. But there were some great guidelines in 2020, guidelines for the e-commerce and food delivery packaging, that the main thing to note is that they're requiring these companies to gather data now on how much plastic waste they're actually producing. I mean, China and using. And see, China has 13th five-year plan mandated that China would be recycling 30% of the plastics that are collected. And they supposedly met that goal, but data is a gigantic problem in China in terms of trying to figure out what's happening in the waste sector. But there's a lot of focus on that, both by the government and with industries and a lot of tech innovators. For example, we're seeing a lot of big and small Chinese tech companies that are creating apps. There's kind of logistics management platforms to kind of help cities and companies collect waste, because the focus right now has been on cities, but then industries are now, there's going to be regulations probably by 2025. There's going to be a full suite of laws and regs on a lot of the companies, and we may see something like EPR. There's also they're redoing their circular economy law. And so that's why there's just a lot of, experimentation and action by companies going on. Now, in terms of another kind of, besides preparing the big, trying to figure out the plastics first mile, to hit the brakes on some of the problematic issues. I mean, it's a tool that we've used in the States, but China, would you like a bag ban? They're doing bans. Hainan province was probably the first that had put out a comprehensive plan in 2019 that by 2025, they're going to stop all production and use of single-use plastics in Hainan. It's the Hawaii of China. Incredibly ambitious, but it's this kind of, technology and innovation pushing kinds of policy coming from the province. And mirroring that policy, we saw in 2021 that the government also issued straw and bag bans, but with the plan to continue to expand them. And I'm just, whoop. And then Sam, this is my last slide. I'm just going to talk briefly about, just giving you kind of a sprinkling about kind of the more bottom up and business action. On the NGO side, we see in this picture, this is the Shanghai Rendu volunteers who are, they have organized people all along the coast of China. They're part of the Ocean Conservancy yearly, plastic pickup, but they do it year round. So they're having, initially it started a few years ago where citizens would just collect it. They've since moved to starting to audit. And we're seeing this all throughout Asia, where NGOs are collecting, auditing waste and kind of figuring out, well, who are the main people who are producing this waste? What are the companies? So there's that kind of push for accountability. And it's also a form of gathering data. It's not the ultimate solution, but it's a great step that is important. And we're seeing here in the US as well. There is a China Zero Waste Alliance. We've had Mao Da, who heads that, speak for us a couple times. They are really kind of coordinating a zero waste movement across the country. I'll point out one of their partner groups, the Plastic Free China in Guangdong province. They've been working with Greenpeace to create some e-commerce and food delivery standards, some practices, suggestions how there could be regulations. So they're kind of, tossing out things for the government to listen to. I think even Plastic Free China is working with your colleagues in China as well, Anthony. There's also, last one I'll mention from the NGO space is actually the Institute for Public and Environmental Affairs with Ma Jun. He's a global fellow at the Wilson Center. He's partnered with the Vanke Foundation, which they've jointly innovated a kind of a waste map. Now, it made me think a little bit about that tracker that Tiana and Anthony talked about, but this is really focused more on the cities, trying to help the cities find out how much waste is being collected, what kind. They've got their citizen science components to it. So there's this, it's really kind of exciting. And we're going to have Ma Jun and hopefully some of his partners come speak in November about this. Last point is just to highlight that we've been seeing in grabbing information, and we're going to get some of these folks to come talk down the road. We have Nestle has been working to create kind of smart recycling machines with some of their partners in China, in Beijing, Shanghai, and Nanjing. There's also I really like this one, that working with Nestle as well, there's the China Synthetic Resin Association Plastic Recycling Branch. It's a long acronym, but they've been running a flexible plastics pilot in 2 Beijing supermarkets. So probably looking at some things like clamshells. And so they have these smart recycling bins. So you'll put your recycling in there. I don't know if they have these around China where sometimes you get credit on your WeChat account, but in this one, oh yeah, they get points on their phone. So it's kind of I love this kind of these reverse recycling kind of machines where consumers deposit things in, they get some kind of reward. But the fact that it's on flexible packaging is particularly intriguing to me, because those are some of the problematic ones. And there's also Unilever and Alibaba have an AI-powered closed loop recycling system where there's going to be kind of a QR code on certain kinds of bottles that can help the MRFs in China sort them better, and to get the plastics could be used by Unilever in other kinds of projects. That's being piloted in Shanghai and Hangzhou. So these are being done both with companies, the local governments, and I can give you some others. I mean, there's Pepsi, Starbucks, McDonald's are doing some, but I just thought it was kind of exciting that we're seeing this kind of like the Avengers Assemble in China, that we're getting similar to talking about what you were talking about, Tiana, the government, NGO, business, and research community trying to figure out a solution. China is very much, I think there's a lot going on. I mean, the recycling industry is not functioning well. So we have the plastic first mile challenge, and some of the things that you guys were talking about, like the EPR, is going further upstream in terms of the eco-design. So and China wants to go there too, but I think first they have got to get their, they have to collect and sort the waste. So I will stop there. And let me go back to some of the questions that have been coming in as I've been talking. One is from Kristen McDonald at Pacific Environment. She's asked if any of the speakers could give some examples of incentives or plastic banning regulations, so carrots and sticks, that seem to be succeeding in motivating companies to innovate, reuse, refill solutions. She's asking because Pacific Environment is also, like a lot of organizations, are making comments on China's circular economy law, and also she's just curious. So, so can someone want to jump in on, maybe Tiana, do you want to start off about some kind of carrots and sticks that you guys are using or you've seen being used?
Sure. So one of our work streams is focused on reuse innovations. And I would say that a big carrot for a consumer is only paying for the product and not the packaging. So Target, one of our activators, has an innovation center, and they're testing out dispensers for different products where the customer would bring in a container. And so I think paying less is a real carrot for many people.
What kind of products are they doing that with? Because we had someone from Indonesia write about, there's a lot of these smaller stores where people are getting shampoos.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of stuff is Target doing? Is it mainly cosmetic things?
Cleaning and personal care products are mostly the items being tested.
So conditioner, right? We can't live without our, but yeah, I mean, I have super curly hair and Tiana and I were talking when we met on the phone about how we got to have our conditioner, but what do I do about the plastic? So great. And Anthony, do you have some examples of kind of carrots or sticks?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to note that the steps forward are both carrots and sticks. This is a partnership between businesses and communities and governments. There's certainly at the national level, extended producer responsibility is one of those that's both a carrot and a stick. Companies need to be involved in the financial operation of our recycling system, and good action should be rewarded. We're also looking at things like investment tax credits for those who are able to invest in our recycling systems to sort of lessen the volatility of some of those investments and increase recycling investments in especially in materials reprocessing facilities. But I do think that it is absolutely a combination between carrots and sticks, that it's not something to punish corporate partners over. We all rely on plastic and printed paper and materials to get our berries and reduce food waste and transport things in a very lightweight fashion and make our lives more convenient. And consumers are certainly a part of that equation as well.
And Sandor, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure. I really like Anthony's investment tax credit example. In the area of energy, for example, there are state and federal tax credits that incentivize companies to invest in renewable and clean energy technologies. We're doing that. We are aggressively investing in solar energy, for example, and so we get to tap into those investment tax credits. And I could see an opportunity there for governments to create the same kind of thing, to invest in the infrastructure to support recycling. I think another carrot for consumers is education and knowledge, and that is the example I gave earlier about the how to recycle. And so if you make it easy for consumers to know what to do with the product, then it's a kind of carrot, and they're not guilty anymore by just chucking it in their black bin. They know how to separate it, or they know they need to wash it before they put it in the blue bin and all of that. So that's really important.
But how about the question of, because there are so many different kinds of plastic. I mean, is it, I don't know, maybe Tiana, does there need to be a government standard on what kind of plastics can be used out there? That there's standards on what's in them, because there's, I mean, I've been told that even with a certain number, 3 or 4 or 5, that maybe there could be other chemicals in different ones that make it problematic. The shape makes it hard to recycle. I mean, does this need to be, I guess, driven by the government regulation to set a baseline for everyone to know what's right to use and what's not?
That would certainly be helpful. We've been told that the U.S. Plastics Pact is the most concrete thing happening for plastics packaging in the nation right now. And so, yes, guidance is needed both on what types of materials, which is why we're coming out with our problematic materials list to encourage not just our activators, but other companies to avoid certain types of plastics and materials. And then with unpacking, I used to work for a local government, and we would do inspections of the recycling cart. Every single street, we would find dirty diapers. And I thought, oh my gosh, does somebody's ex-boyfriend work at the MRF and they're trying to punish him? Or what's going on here? Why are they confused? Do they think, oh, this is plastic, it goes in a recycling bin, and they'll sort out the biological material from I'm just baffled. But one of our on-pack labeling workstream pointed out on the box the diapers are sold in, there's a recycling symbol.
Yeah.
So they see that, and yes, the cardboard is perfectly recyclable, but an average consumer might assume that this is recyclable.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge. I see a lot of wish cycling on my street and have engaged in conversations, and I haven't meant to start fights, but I'm just going to say it too. No, it is a challenge. I have so many questions. Thank you everyone for submitting it online. Someone made a comment about how in France, where'd it go? I'm so sorry. I'm getting used to the new app here. This that in France that they've actually, in 2020, France banned the selling of fruits and vegetables in plastic packaging by 2022. Do we see this? Is this something that we think is going to be, is that a tool in the toolbox that you see, that either any of you see should come out? I mean, we should talk to Sandor first. I mean, this, because it's going to affect you as well, because if your company shipping, I assume you sell your great berries in France too, right?
We do have a thriving business in Europe, and there are country by country variations. For example, in Northern Europe, there are some more aggressive timelines for the transition. What I would say is my response to something like that is, what problem are we trying to solve? And are we trying to have a net positive impact on planet Earth, or are we trying to eliminate plastic waste? And when there is a tremendous amount of misinformation about paper. There is sort of this emotional appeal. Hey, if we get out of plastic and put it into paper, it actually turns out that paper, in some respects, has a higher carbon footprint than plastic. So paper requires more energy, it requires more water, it's heavier, therefore you're burning more fuel. And so when you look at it all in, I'm not going to take a position on which one's good or bad. Our view is we want to close the loop, and we want to eliminate these materials from watersheds and landfills and close the loop. And so I would urge any policymakers and governments that may be listening to this session today is really think about what problem are you trying to solve, and simply outlawing plastic and saying everything's got to be in paper may have an unintended consequence that we might regret. And so it's really about closing the loop.
No, and I yeah, that's great, because it is, the ban is, it's a heavy tool. I mean, but I wasn't surprised that China went to the bans first, because they can support them, but it doesn't necessarily, maybe it pushes innovation. I don't know, but I got a question in from someone at NIST about bioplastics, and that was kind of mentioned. And I know that in China, that's also been kind of a popular suggestion that might be coming into the laws. But can someone tell me a little bit more about it? Because bioplastics it's not like a magic solution, because bioplastic still has plastic, and is it recyclable? Tell me a story. Who wants to?
Yeah,
I can start on that. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I can kick it off, and Tiana and Anthony, I'm sure, will add some more color to it. Bioplastic is coming. It is like anything that's new. It is in extremely limited quantities today. I think something like less than 1% of the global plastics capacity today is in bioplastic. So that's one. And two, it's anywhere from 2 to 4 times more expensive on an apples to apples weight basis to PET plastic. And now, I think it has a really important role. We think it has a very important role. And like all new things, innovation is never cheap or easy or straightforward. And so if you think about, where were electric vehicles 10 years ago and where are they today? I viewed through that lens, I think bioplastics will play a role in the future.
Yeah, and I'd agree. It's included in our pact targets, which is a really important mention. WWF also works on, we have an initiative called the Bioplastic Feedstock Alliance, which works with some of our corporate partners to ensure that when we're using bio-based plastics, because it is such a new and emerging and exciting technology, it's feeding into our existing recycling systems. It's not creating a new undue burden on our planet. That the goals of bioplastic, it being more environmentally friendly and less environmentally impactful, are actually being met. So they're all really exciting research. I definitely encourage everyone to check out our friends at the Bioplastic Feedstock Alliance. I don't know if Tiana wanted to mention how it's incorporated into the pact, but.
I think you very well covered it. And something important to look out for is exactly what you said, Anthony, is making sure the material is recyclable and the MRFs know how to identify that material properly, but it's certainly very exciting to watch.
Which reminds me, when after the pandemic subsides, everyone really should go visit a MRF. I visited them a few times and it's amazing, and you will become the best recycler on the planet after you see it, because you're going to sort your stuff, you're going to clean it. Quick one, one person asked just briefly for you, Sandor, Amy Schmidt from a natural resource economist. She wanted to know, like you had some targets for, she said, please provide by which date will Driscoll's implement the 4 targets identified? Oh, wait, maybe she's referring to Tiana's targets, right?
Yes, and our deadline is very tight. It's 2025. So we're really pushing our activators, and it is so inspiring to see the work that they're doing. I'll give you an example with Colgate. Colgate, through Tom's of Maine, has come up with a toothpaste tube that's only made out of one type of plastic, so it can be recycled. Now, Colgate knows, though, that someone working at a materials recovery facility isn't going to have time to pick up that tube and go, oh, Tom's of Maine, good stuff. Let me put it in the recycling bin. Oh, this one, no. And so they've open sourced how they did it so that their competitors can also make tubes that can be recycled. And so that's the kind of thing that I find truly inspiring, is how our groups are working together to try to reach those goals by 2025.
Yeah, I've invited Colgate to come talk about that, because I was really surprised and impressed. Are there some other examples that you or Anthony can give me about some other companies that are being innovative to meet these kind of these tough US PAC goals?
So businesses are doing a tremendous amount of work. We have a company that focuses on MRF technology that is working with some of our activators. Another example that's from not-for-profit that comes to mind is the city of Phoenix is building a facility that's connected to their MRF to work with entrepreneurs to figure out how to use that feedstock and to make it convenient for them. I think that's really neat. And the city of Austin has a reverse pitch, so kind of like a Shark Tank, but instead of entrepreneurs pitching their ideas, it's companies saying, we have this leftover feedstock. You as an entrepreneur, do you have any ideas on what we could do with it?
I love that. It should be on TV. That would be really fun, right? They should actually go into Shark Tank. They should try that, make that. Okay. Ted Lung from Wilson Center Fellow just sent a question. I think it's for me. I guess I'll answer it. Beijing banned free plastic bags in 2008, and it really wasn't successful. He says, will this time be different? Ted, I think this time it will be different, because now there's a war on plastic, a war on waste in China. And we're seeing that the kinds of laws and policies that they're starting to set the baseline for them. And the fact that I've seen, I gave a handful of examples, and over the next, 6 months, I'll be getting hopefully some more of the corporate folks to come in and tell their stories about how seeing Chinese and international companies also trying to come up with technical solutions to improve that plastic first mile issue. But where I'm kind of wondering where the question mark I still have is what kind of policies are going to come out to really promote the kind of innovation that you're talking about, Tiana? This kind of, again, bans are great, but a ban's not going to get you a single plastic toothpaste tube, right? So there's, do any of you have a question for someone else? Anthony, do you have a question for? No, you're good. Just want to check. Someone from Jeff Yang from the scientists at the EPA. He said, is there any ongoing international cooperation in public or private between sectors, US, China, and Asian countries? And I guess maybe, but the more important part, his second part was saying, are climate impacts of plastic part of any of your work?
I would say that we are we're beginning to do exactly that, is to look at plastics in addition to the other elements, energy, water, through a climate from a climate perspective. So I would say we're at the very early stages of that.
And to add on to that, from WWF's perspective, as a conservation organization, that certainly is one of our objectives, to look at this in a climate lens. The production of plastic, virgin plastic specifically, is expected to grow, and is expected to be sort of the petroleum sector's replacement as things get more energy efficient and we transition to electric cars and solar power and all of that. You're literally looking to transition into the production of plastic. And the question that we continuously ask ourselves is, why do we need to create new plastic when there's already so much plastic that we should be able to reuse or recycle effectively? So that is certainly one of the lenses in which we think about it from a conservation standpoint, is the production of plastic from oil products has impacts and climate impacts and greenhouse gas emissions in its production and manufacturing. And how can we limit that as we transition to a circular economy?
Because I've seen numbers that if plastic is not reined in, that it could eat up like 10 to 13% of our carbon budget, and
absolutely,
that's not good. And Tiana, do you have anything to add there? Because climate was part of the PAC's goals too, right?
Yeah. So whenever we eliminate unnecessary plastic and keep plastic in circulation, as Anthony said, it certainly helps mitigate climate impacts.
Good. Oh, and I got a clarification, Sandor, that question was for you. The question about the timing was about the packaging changes that you're making at Driscoll's. Was there a timeline for it? Sorry, I misquoted it, but it led to a great answer on something else.
Yes, specifically the transition to the so-called BOPP label, the biaxially oriented polypropylene. We will be 100% converted to that technology by 2023, and we've made that commitment publicly, even before we joined the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's commitment, and it's certainly part of that. So we're well on the way to transitioning to that by 2023, and then some of the other commitments align with the timelines that Tiana highlighted, 2025.
Good. Yeah, we're starting to bump up against the deadline here. I mean, you guys have given us great food for thought. I'll probably have some of you back with other cast of characters. Want to thank the audience for being patient with me as I'm learning to scroll through our great little app here where I can see your questions. Looking forward to someday where I have everyone in a room raising hands. Do want to note that it'll be on the website soon, but on November 15th, we're going to have a meeting focused on China plastics. Going to have Ma Jun and some others talking about some of the trends there on transparency. And on December 1st, we're having a climate and plastic meeting. So you kind of helped tee me up with that last answer. Trying to get more information out there about what are the linkages, and I think it's adding more fuel to the fire. That's not a good phrase to use there, but that we do need to have, if we have, like you said, Anthony, like a Paris agreement for plastic, but you got to pick the city, you can't say Paris or plastic. So maybe DC. Right? Okay, but I want to thank my speakers here for I don't know, sharing your stories. I hope my quick romp through China stuff gave you some insights as well, because we're going more into China. We also will continue having conversations with folks in Southeast Asia, because they are also a very important part of the equation, and at a very, very different stage of, waste recycling capacity. So thank you very much, everyone. And I want to thank our AV team for making it happen today. And we will see you next month. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.